simply having someone who you talk to about what you want to do, who doesn't offer you any counter advice, is not a mentor relationship. It's simply a yes man. And therefore, being willing and open to be in either side of that relationship is a first big step. Second of all, I do think that the hardest part of being a mentor is recognizing that it takes time and it takes commitment. And again, I think if you schedule being a mentor, it's really hard. But if you have rhythm in being a mentor, then you can provide real insights into someone's life because you're seeing them do life. And so it requires time. It requires a meal. It requires an interruption in the day at a moment when you need to talk. It does require a commitment on both sides.
Welcome to the Going Big podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Gentry, and this is the place where we celebrate bold moves and big ideas. Each week, I sit down with inspiring leaders, entrepreneurs, and change makers who are making a significant impact in their careers and in their communities. Whether you're looking to level up your leadership, pursue your passion, or just get inspired to take your next big leap, this is where those stories come to life. Now, if you're listening on iTunes, YouTube, or anywhere else you tune into podcasts, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. Now, let's dive in to what it means to truly go big. Well, welcome to another episode of the Going Big podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Gentry, and it's a great privilege to have as a very special conversation today, something that I've been looking forward to for a long time. My guest is Governor Glenn Youngkin, and you, of course, know him as the governor of Virginia. But aside from all of the policy debates and victories and everything else going on related to that, today's conversation is going to go much more deeply because we're going to talk about a man who's had quite a journey. And you'll see that before that journey for political office, he had been guided for a long time by his faith, by mentors who saw something in him perhaps he hadn't even yet seen in himself. And I think you're going to see a lot of discovery that can help you address some of the same questions you might have in your life. But there's a lot to talk about, even with respect to being the governor, the 74th governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Governor Glenn Youngkin, it's great to be with you today.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for letting me join you. And I'm so looking forward to this conversation. I have to say that I just, first of all, appreciate our friendship more than anything else. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about, hopefully, over the course of the next few minutes, is the importance of relationships.
Well, thanks. And, as I said in the introduction, I think a lot of people's exposure to you is through the news media, and sometimes it's short sound bites. Maybe it's a longer interview, but I don't know how much they really know about you. And as coming to know you and your family has been really great for me and my family, and I want more people to see the special stuff that we've seen in you. So to get started, even before we get into the business side and the politics, tell us a little bit about your life, your childhood, the kind of values that were instilled upon you as you were growing up. Just tell us a little bit about growing up in Virginia.
Perfect. I feel like I should probably lay down on a couch before we get started. But
this is going to be a lot of fun.
I appreciate you starting there because so much of who we are, particularly as adults, is influenced by what happened to us as kids. And I grew up in a great family. I had two incredibly loving parents and a great sister, grandparents, and cousins. And it was just a great environment to grow up in. We grew up here in Richmond and born in Richmond and grew up in Bon Air and Chesterfield County right here in Greater Richmond. And so much of my early childhood was really just enjoying my family and watching my mom and my dad, who both worked hard. My mom was a nurse and my dad was a accountant, and it was just fabulous to watch them and to grow up with good neighbors in a fun neighborhood. The most important thing that happened along the way, I think, had just a monumental impact on me was my dad lost his job when I was in 7th grade. And listen, rough things happen to families, and you see the character of a family or a person or a community when tough things happen. And we saw the character of Southwest Virginia this year, or last year during Hurricane Helene, and how they responded. And it was just extraordinarily inspiring to see it. Well, my family had a really rough time, and my dad lost his job, and we had to move and start all over again. And it was during that time that I think a lot of the basic values that my parents stood for really began to shine through in all of us. One is you don't step away and quit. You figure out how to keep going. And my mom drove so much of our family decision at the time. She was just an extremely strong woman, and she's a nurse. I mean, you always knew exactly what she wanted you to do, but she communicated with great empathy. But we were going to go get this sorted out. And second of all, that hard work really does prevail. And so we moved as a family and kind of restarted, and it gave me a chance to do some things that I needed to do. I got a job as a youngish teenager, washing dishes and taking out trash, and eventually becoming a breakfast cook at a diner down at Virginia Beach. And I learned how to get to work at 6 o'clock in the morning on my bike. I learned what it meant to get a paycheck and the value of that paycheck. I also knew what it meant to see taxes taken out of your paycheck. And in fact, I didn't like that. That phase of my life, I think, had just a very long-lasting impact on the rest of my life because my family decided that we weren't going to give up, but we were going to start again and prevail.
Well, that's awesome. If I could even dig a little bit more deeply into that aspect of your character development, were there, in addition to your family, your mom, coaches, teachers, others that had an influence as you were quietly, frankly, I think, developing your leadership skills?
I think everyone probably has a similar perspective in that there have been many, many people through my life journey that have had profound impacts on me. Everyone, yes, from my parents, particularly, but coaches. And, listen, I was a basketball player all the way up through college, and I listened to coaches. I disagreed with coaches sometimes. You learn how to disagree and yet do what they want you to do. You learn how to be on time, and you learn how to run when you make a mistake. And I think that's actually one of the great attributes of being on sports teams. I had great teachers along the way, and a couple of teachers along the way really said to me, you can do so much more than you're doing. And I think it was one of the early reinforcement mechanisms to have high ambition and high expectations, to think big and to not settle. And oftentimes it is a teacher who pushes you in a place that maybe was uncomfortable, but opened up a whole new understanding of what's possible. And I had teachers in third and fourth grade here in Greater Richmond, and of course in middle school and high school that did that for me. And I had, as a young man, I had pastors in my life that just changed things. And of course, bosses and oftentimes coworkers and folks that worked for me along the way that taught me a lot as well. So I do think that the life journey is filled with folks that serve as mentors and advisors and truth tellers. And our job is to recognize when that's happening. As a child, sometimes it happens without you recognizing it. And as we get more mature, we just constantly have to be open to those deep relationships, which help us to become the person that the Lord ordained us to be.
Indeed. Well, that's great. And, I have heard that from a number of people I've interviewed about just somebody who almost even intervened at a certain stage early in life and said, hey, you need to push yourself harder. You need to just raise the bar a little bit higher. Well, continuing along. Okay, so you went to Rice, University of Texas, to play basketball. Then you went to Harvard Business School. What did that season of your life begin to sort of tell you about yourself and what you might be able to do?
The fun part is I learned two really important lessons. One lesson is that hard work really does translate into outcomes, and it's a huge ingredient. And not always does hard work mean success, but it is so important. And I learned how to work hard. I was a mechanical engineer, a management studies major, and I, on top of that, had a job being a college basketball player that was, you pick the time, anywhere from 40 to 60 hours a week of added stuff. And I just learned how to work hard. And on the flip side, I also got a big dose of reality, and I guess one might call it humble pie, because I had been a really, really good high school basketball player. And when I got to college, I found out that I wasn't going to be the NBA star that I hoped I would be. I wasn't even going to be the college star. I played for 4 years. I served as co-captain my senior year. But when people ask me, what position did you play in college? I smile and look at them and honestly say bench. And you learn a lot from sitting on the bench. You learn a lot about how to value that 5 to 6 or 7 minutes that you might get in the game and to make the most out of it. You also recognize that you have a job to do, and your job is to make sure that the guys that play a lot are ready to play. And then finally, and I'm not sure my coach always appreciated it, but I always had ideas of things we could do better as a team, and I shared them freely. And maybe my coach at the time didn't love it, but we're really good friends today. So, that humble pie that comes with pouring everything you have into what you're doing and not getting the outcomes that you want is a really important lesson. It's a lesson that there's always people that are going to be more talented and there's teams that are going to be better. But it doesn't diminish the fact that pouring yourself into your endeavor is critical. That was just a huge part of college for me. Business school was really different. Business school is a moment where now I could focus all my effort on business school. And again, I was quick to acknowledge the fact that if you worked hard, you could really excel. But on top of that, I also was in a classroom environment where I learned more from my peers than I could have possibly imagined. And I think it was one of the first times that listening became one of the top characteristics of success. Listening to what was being said, how it was being described, what other people had experienced, and using that to help inform decisions and outcomes. And it was just a huge part of my business school experience, which I think is something that is not only critical in the job I do today, but it's been a key component of everything I've done since then.
Would you elaborate a little bit more on the listening piece? Why is that so important?
Well, listen, we go through life thinking that everything that we have to say is so important that everybody should listen to me, as opposed to share their pearls of wisdom and me to benefit from them. And it's human nature at the end of the day. And yet good listeners tend to be, I think, good leaders. Good listeners tend to understand that there are multiple perspectives that go into solving a problem. Good listeners understand how to assess the different skill sets on a team in order to construct a team that can optimize an outcome, that can execute against a plan, that can deliver results when others couldn't. Good listeners communicate a very, very important sentiment, which is I respect you. I respect what you have to say, and I want to listen to you. I just think it's a critical part of being effective.
Well, this is really outstanding, and I think our audience is quickly appreciating why I really was looking forward to having you on here, because there's a lot that you have to say. I've known this for a long time about character formation and what's important as we all try to go big in our lives. Well, continuing along, okay, so you were at Harvard Business School, certification, #1 certification for business school. I think were you at McKinsey briefly, but you went to the Carlyle Group. Tell us about that. I want to go eventually into the leadership position there, but tell us about that next stage of joining Carlyle.
Well, at the time, Carlyle was a really small-ish, if not small, organization. And I just had an opportunity to join, one might say, at the ground floor of an exciting and rapidly growing organization, led by good men, 3 founders who I deeply respected. And we went to work, and the learning curve was just extraordinary, because we learned how to assess, how to plan, how to design a value creation plan, how to build teams, how to execute, but really, most importantly, how to focus on the results. Now, there are lots of folks that can draw up good plans, but plans are nothing without the ability to execute against them and deliver results. And I think that was one of the major takeaways from my time in the business world, is there's people who are a dime a dozen who have good ideas, but it's the ability to translate really good ideas into results that matters. I also, again, saw the real value of building great teams, and teams that can come together and see different perspectives in order to formulate the best plan, but then also work in order to deliver it. And that just was something that started on my first day at Carlisle and stayed with me all the way through I left as co-CEO 25 years later. I also deeply appreciate a basic truth, which is growth is a good thing. It creates opportunity. When there's a growing pie, when there's an organization that is expanding, then it creates the sense of being able to contribute, but also bringing in new talent and unleashing opportunity. And it really is almost a seed of optimism that we are growing, and therefore we can accomplish lots of things. And I'll have a big role in that I think is also part of my basic philosophy. I always tell everybody around Virginia that growth is a good thing. And therefore, if we foster growth, then we will unleash opportunity. If we foster economic development, if we foster job creation, if we foster educational excellence, if we make sure that communities are safe, then people have this inherent confidence that their dreams can be achieved. And then they will want to do it here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Companies will believe that their growth prospects and aspirations in order to be successful can be achieved here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I think that really underpins just a basic belief that growth is a good thing, and we've got to find ways to unleash it because it unleashes opportunity and prosperity along the way.
Well, the kind of insights that you're sharing now, when I've been in audiences where you've done this in other different venues, I've seen the audience really lean in. And, our friend Tom Smith told me when he first heard you that he was so just impressed by the fact that you are not just another political person with ideas. You are results focused and you have a vision for how to get those results achieved. And I think that makes you in a chief executive spot. That's what is a big attribute, a big reason for your success. But if I could just even go in further on that, when you were in business, did you think that you were also beginning to prepare for something beyond business? I know we can go through the particulars of how you decided to run for governor of Virginia, but as you're learning all of these leadership traits in business, did you see that there could be application beyond business?
Well, the short answer is I never dreamed I'd be sitting here. And it really wasn't in the plan. I was in my dream job. I mean, as we just discussed, I was a kid who in the 8th grade got a job washing dishes and eventually became the breakfast cook and was so excited when I opened up my bank account around the corner in order to deposit what was my minimum wage check. And it was just a moment of reality in my life. And then to dream that I would someday get a chance to lead an organization that I had started as a young man in, and that organization would be as globally present and impactful as the Carlisle Group, I could have never conceived of it. And so I was in my dream job, and a job that I never thought that I would have a chance to actually be in. And so the moment that I decided to step out of that job was one of those knock me off my horse moments. I was seeing a Virginia that was truly lost. I grew up in this great Commonwealth of Virginia with an understanding that Virginia leads. I mean, from the founding of this country, Virginia has led. I always have to chuckle when I say that America was made in Virginia, and I know my friends in Pennsylvania and the other 12 former colonies might disagree with me. But when we look back at the role that Virginia played at the founding of this nation, and then I fast forward and saw Virginia in 2020 and 2021, I was really, really concerned. We were near the bottom of the pack in job creation coming out of the pandemic. We were near the bottom of the pack in getting our schools back open. We were 20-year high in murder rate. We had the largest learning loss in the nation in fourth grade reading and math. And we saw businesses close left, right, and center. We had 25,000 small businesses shut in 2021 alone. And businesses weren't coming. And all of a sudden, the Virginia that was the crucible of democracy and the land of opportunity was something very, very different, and it was struggling. And so here is this homegrown Virginian who loves the Commonwealth, and I just saw it through a different lens, a lens of a businessman who had been, I think, well-trained in how to assess issues, develop plans, put together teams, set aspirational targets, and to do it on a comprehensive basis, not on a one-off basis. And I had a real calling on my heart in my own prayer life to quit my job and run for governor. And much to my wife's frustration at the beginning, because she cried when I told her I was going to quit my job and run for governor. But after we prayed over it, we both committed ourselves that if we were elected, we would serve. And I have to say, what a moment that was. It was a moment of real surrender. Because I didn't really know how to win a political race. I'd never run for anything. I think I ran for vice president in my junior year in high school, and I did win. But it was a real change in what I was doing, how I was doing it, and most importantly, it was an enormous change for my family. And so I just so deeply appreciate their willingness to be on this journey with me and the sacrifices that all of them have made. I could tell you, without my family, I would never be here.
All right. Well, I want to tackle some other subjects related to this. You've got so much good stuff here, and I want to put a pin in the business piece. I want to move over to the faith piece. But before that, for the benefit of those listening who may not be Virginia-born like you and me, as we're entering the celebration of America's 250th, why don't you just give a little context and perspective for who preceded you as governor of Virginia and who some of those founders were that really made such an impact?
Well, I'm reminded every day. I wake up in a house that was procured by Monroe. And I walk down the steps of the governor's mansion in Richmond, and I see a Capitol that was designed by Thomas Jefferson. And then I look across Capitol Square, and I see this immensely impressive statue of George Washington on horseback. And then I take a right, and I go work in the Patrick Henry Building. And I have to say, every day I'm reminded that there were founders of this nation from Virginia who were willing to sacrifice everything, not to work harder tomorrow than they'd ever worked, but literally to sacrifice everything for the basic truth that we are endowed with inalienable rights, and among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that endowment comes from an almighty creator. This basic concept was so revolutionary, never been transformed into a nation, not to mention a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. That is our nation today. And I just have always carried with me an immense sense of both humility for what these men were willing to sacrifice and their families, but also just a deep sense of pride with a good P as opposed to bad pride in what Virginia contributed. And I think that's part of why this job as governor in the Commonwealth of Virginia is one that comes with expectations that we are going to move Virginia forward, and we're not going to let her stagnate or fall back. And it comes with a recognition that our very first governor was Patrick Henry. Patrick Henry, who stirred the hearts of his fellow Virginians to not be on the sidelines and to actually join Massachusetts to fight for liberty and freedom. And he was followed by Thomas Jefferson. And I'm constantly humbled beyond belief that my name as number 74 is on a list with these founders who, as I said, envisioned a nation's aspiration that they knew we couldn't live up to. And yet they set the most bold aspiration for a nation that would reflect these basic truths. And that's why every day I go to work with a real sense of responsibility, but also opportunity to serve, because I know that every day we can make a difference.
Well, it is pretty amazing, especially in that tiny little colony at the time. Those great people stepped forward. So in the context of how you talk about our inalienable rights, you reference obviously that they came from our Creator. You've been pretty open about your faith. Another thing that I admire about you, when did faith become an important part of your life? If you could kind of give us a glimpse of how that forms you.
I didn't grow up in an overly faithful family. As I said, I had just great parents who loved my sister and me unconditionally. But faith was not rooted in the middle of everything that we did as a family. And when I met Suzanne, who, by the way, I think has been the most amazing first lady, she has just
Agreed.
contributed so much with grace and love and service to the Commonwealth. When I first met her, I was overwhelmed by her and I wanted to marry her. And so I worked really hard. She didn't really want to marry me at the beginning, to be honest. And over time, I wore her down. And when I asked her to marry me, she gave me a conditional yes. And it was conditioned on putting our Savior, Jesus Christ, in the middle of our marriage, because that was going to not only reflect her values that needed to become our values, but it was going to be essential to a successful marriage. And so she put me on this path. And it was a path that so foundationally changed my life to a point where today I so appreciate and Almighty God, who sacrificed his only begotten Son for me, I so appreciate the unconditional love, but I also appreciate the confidence that I have in the help that comes from the Lord. I have on the back of my gubernatorial challenge coin Psalm 121, which is, where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. I mean, at the end of the day, there's both a confidence, but also a recognition of love above everything that comes with my faith. And I purposely did not check it at the door when I started to run for office. I was very clear. This is who I am. This is what I believe. And my faith will guide me. And I do believe that in many circumstances, folks try to hide their faith in public service jobs. And I think it's really important to just be transparent. This is what I believe. This is why I believe it. And it helps me be competent about the job I'm doing and I believe make good decisions.
Well, I really admire that about you. And I got to tell you, I didn't really get to know you until your campaign in 2021 for governor. And it was late in the campaign, you were at an event in Northern Virginia, and you started to speak about your faith. And I was like, Glenn, I don't think this is a good place to do this. This is not necessarily, they're not going to agree with you. And I think it was really so admirable that you did that and how you did it. And you have just a very nice, winsome way about how you do it. Our mutual friend, Wendy Borchert, told me that when she first heard you speak, when you were first running for governor to a group of people in Northern Virginia, someone asked you, who was the most important influence in your life outside of your wife, Suzanne? And you responded, John Yates, the Falls Church Anglican, a person that you and I admire a great deal. In fact, you and Suzanne and Ann and me were at the church at the same time, although I don't think we actually knew each other way back when, before you moved to London with Carlisle. If you would, tell us a little bit, why did John Yates rise up as a name that was an influence?
John, first of all, was the rector of the Falls Church at the time when Suzanne's request of me was in full motion. And so I found myself searching to understand what a faith in the Christian context really meant. And I needed a mentor. And I met John Yates. And whether it was from the pulpit or seeing the way that he and his amazing wife, Susan, lived their lives and raised their family, or in a small men's group where we heard much more from him about questions that he had and how he addressed them and the ability to ask questions and discuss things. He just had a monumental impact on me at a time where I was going through this huge step. But mentors matter. And I've watched mentors enter my life at so many different stages, and oftentimes when I probably needed them most, but understood it least. And again, I thank the Lord for that. And there have been mentors along the way. I view my mother as a mentor. I view my father as a mentor. But on top of that, a man like John Yates, a boss like my very first boss coming out of college, who was far more focused on relationships and how we did business than the outcome of business. The way that I believed our founders at Carlisle worked so hard in order to try to do things the right way, and would even consciously sacrifice the highest profit outcome in order to make sure they were doing things the right way. It just left an indelible imprint on my life. And yes, John Yates was incredibly important at that time of my life, because I do believe that finally getting on the path that Suzanne invited me on and having my life transformed through my faith was not just Suzanne, but I think John Yates was placed there for a reason.
Wow. Well, that is very nice. And as you, I think, know, I had John as a guest on the Going Big podcast. He was awesome as always. He is just so gifted. And we talked about mentors, and you just talked about mentors. What advice would you have for folks listening about how they might themselves be mentors from your own experience? Are you intentional in that way today or not? I mean, how does that work? And then how should you sort of be mentored? How should you think about looking for mentors? Or any thoughts on advice for folks listening? Because mentors always come up as being so important.
Mentors, one, have to be cultivated. They can't just be created. They have to be cultivated. And that requires two parties. It requires someone to want to receive some counsel, advice, and oftentimes hard truth. But then it also requires a counterparty who's willing to invest time in that relationship. And so it requires two folks. I always am quick to correct that simply having someone who you talk to about what you want to do, who doesn't offer you any counter advice, is not a mentor relationship. It's simply a yes man. And therefore, being willing and open to be in either side of that relationship is a first big step. Second of all, I do think that the hardest part of being a mentor is recognizing that it takes time and it takes commitment. And again, I think if you schedule being a mentor, it's really hard. But if you have rhythm in being a mentor, then you can provide real insights into someone's life because you're seeing them do life. And so it requires time. It requires a meal. It requires an interruption in the day at a moment when you need to talk. It does require a commitment on both sides. And finally, I'm going to go back to something I said earlier. Being a mentor doesn't mean that you're espousing pearls of wisdom all the time. It also means you're listening. And again, listening is so important because so often your counterparty, your friends, the person who you love because you're willing to commit to being on a walk with them, sometimes needs to sort through their issue or their concern by expressing and working through it themselves as opposed to being told what the answer is. And I have to say, the hardest thing as a mentor sometimes is to just sit and listen and allow someone who is working through a problem, working through a situation, to work through it. And I have to say, I think one of the greatest mentors that I've had in my now 59 years of life was a gentleman who was really good at sitting there and listening. And I look back at my friend Mac, who I still pray with every 2 or 3 weeks, and been doing it for 20 plus years. And he's just a really good listener. And so we need that person in our life too.
No, that is great. And of all the mentor questions I've asked, the listening piece has not come up. So thank you for offering that and emphasizing its importance. I want to begin to wrap it up. One other thing, though, in your life, you've obviously talked a lot about how sports has been a big factor, not only in your character development, but how you lead, how you think about decisions. Any particular insights from sports that you might share as well?
I have to be really honest. I'm incredibly competitive.
No, really? I've never heard that. I've never noticed that at all.
Suzanne, oftentimes in a condescending way says, "You're the most competitive person on the planet." I don't think of that, but listen, I do believe
You're
that
competitive in a good way, I think.
competition's important, and recognizing that we keep score for a reason in games. And it really does drive effort, and it drives the purposeful formulation of strategic direction to try to win. And I think that's part of being, I think, a good servant leader, is recognizing that setting objectives, and those objectives being aspirational, and then formulating a way to execute and to achieve results. I mean, that is sports. Doing it with a team, recognizing that there are different roles on that team. I always tell everybody, not everybody can be the shooting guard. On a basketball team, you need folks that rebound and set picks and play defense. And, oh, by the way, you need somebody on the bench who can help you get better in practice. That's kind of my own accolade. But at the end of the day, sports really does translate so much of some of the life lessons that I believe are important into practical examples. And therefore, I've just always been an advocate of playing sports. And by the way, there's a lot of folks who don't feel they're athletic and therefore don't want to play sports. I'm 6'6". I kind of had an unfair advantage in a lot of things in basketball. And I don't specifically mean the sport has to be organized and playing in college, but playing on a team, being on a team is really important. I just recently was speaking with a gentleman who is really the patriarch of the robot teams across the country that are competing in high schools, and they're teams. They're teams that have an objective, that develop a plan, that have to execute that plan, that have to designate roles. It's extraordinary to see. And so this concept is really, really important. But I also think it reemphasizes the role of adults, coaches, with maturing children or adolescents or even grown-ups. And that relationship also is critically important. And that's why I've always wanted to coach. I coached all my kids growing up. And I thought that was just one, fun, but also important. And when I wasn't able to coach them, I wanted to make sure the person that was coaching them was a good coach, was a good person, because that relationship is so important in learning the lessons of being on a sports team and not taking away the wrong lessons. And then I say, finally, it is those lessons that have translated into so much of the way I designed the initial day one game plan for the Commonwealth of Virginia, Kevin. I mean, I laid out an initial game plan that was a comprehensive transformation of the Commonwealth to take us from, as I said, where we were struggling to leading, and to do it across every aspect of the state. Economic development, job creation, deregulation, to make sure the communities were safe by backing law enforcement, making sure that we led the nation to reduce fentanyl overdoses, to transform education to stand for excellence so that every student in the Commonwealth of Virginia has the opportunity to receive an excellent education, but to do it in the context of parents being at the head of the table, to make sure that we are taking care of God's gift to the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm a conservationist, and I think it's one of our great requirements and responsibilities to run government better so that we can see outcomes that are connected to problems and to see those outcomes really transform lives. We were talking today about maternal mortality which was a big problem when we came into the Commonwealth. And I've never suggested it's eradicated, but we led the nation in reducing maternal mortality rates by 70% over the last few years, of making sure that healthy moms and healthy babies are translate into healthy communities. I mean, all of this, I think, is part of a life journey that I have felt has reinforced those basic tenets of recognizing, one, we have to set big ambition and aspirations. We have to not settle. Second of all, we've got to set objectives that stretch us, but then put teams and plans together to address them. And we've got to translate aspirations to results. You know, dreams are great, but we also need to make sure that we have results, and dreams that don't translate into results end up being just dreams. And I want all Virginians to have dreams that translate into outcomes.
Oh, well, I think it's easy for this audience now to see how you've been so successful, and you've had all these things in your life that have helped shape your character and prepared you for this moment. But you're not done, it's time though to start wrapping this conversation up. I want to take this now into a little bit of a special turn before I get to the closing questions. I reached out this morning to my daughter, who's a middle school social studies teacher in Central Virginia, and she polled her 7th graders on some questions to ask you. And I've just got a few of them. These are fun. And I think this will be a nice little exercise. So, number one, was there one issue that made you truly want to take the initiative and run for governor?
The short answer is yes, but it's not a single issue. It is that I was frustrated that Virginia was no longer leading, but was falling behind. And I felt that Virginia and the opportunity for Virginians required our state to reestablish itself as a leader.
All right. Thank you. And this one, I think you've kind of addressed already, but did you always want to be governor, or when you were a kid, did you want to be something else?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. That's what I wanted to do. And it's one of the reasons why I went to Rice University, because I got a chance to work with NASA and design a lunar space station. That's what I wanted to do. I'm 6'6". I wasn't going up in a rocket, and that was a really kind of soul-crushing realization. But no, I did not grow up dreaming I would be governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. I really wanted to go to the moon.
Awesome. Okay, a few more. These are great. On a scale of 1 to 10, how hard and stressful is it to be governor?
It is stressful because you want to do a great job in everything. And hard is one of those crazy words. Are there difficult decisions? Is there an intense period of work for 4 years as governor of Virginia? Yes, but it's not hard if you love it every day. And I have not had a single day where I haven't bounded out of my bed and run down those steps after a morning prayer and gone to work and not felt more purposeful. I have felt like I am where I'm supposed to be, doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and doing it with an extraordinary collection of talented people. And it is, in fact, that moment where it's not hard, but it is so meaningful and purposeful that just makes this the best job in the world.
All right. Well, here's another. This is another good one. How do you deal with people who hate on you?
You know what? I try very hard to live my faith. And one of the great scriptures is Matthew 18. And it instructs us that when we have a disagreement, to take that disagreement into private and talk to that person. I'll tell you, it's hard in a world of politics where personal attacks become the norm. And I've tried very hard not to do that. And so I really do look to my wife to reinforce me, because she's a wonderful counselor who helps me be my best self. But also it was a commitment I made when we started, which was I would debate policy until I was red in the face. I would demand excellence, and I would work with teams and probably push them harder than many of them have ever been pushed before. But I was not going to demean people. And that continues to be, I think, something that I'm very committed to.
Well, by the way, thank you for that. I think a lot of people really appreciate that. I remember reading in the media once when a reporter asked you how to respond to someone who'd attacked you pretty viciously, and you just said, "That's just not how I roll." And it was treated very well. Okay, just a couple more. What's the best thing about being governor, and do you ever have fun?
So the best thing about being governor, I got two. One is doing it with my wife. The fact that the First Lady has been on this journey with me and we get a chance to do this together has been amazing. It just has been amazing. And I look at her sometimes in awe. I'll watch her give a speech and it'll bring a tear to my eye to say, hey, that's my wife. She's a rock star. Look at all the great stuff she's doing. That has been so awesome. I also have to say I like breakfast a lot. I go back to my days of being a breakfast cook, and I love 2 eggs over easy, 2 patties of sausage, hash browns, and toast. And at the governor's residence, I can get that every morning.
Well, there was another question. Do you prefer waffles or pancakes?
I prefer both, actually. And it all depends on what's going with them. If it's sausage and eggs, it's pancakes. And if it's on its own, waffles.
Interesting. Okay, awesome. And there are 2 more 7th grade questions. These are some good questions. Was there one thing in particular that made you want to ban cell phones in schools?
It was the recognition that cell phones were hurting all of our kids. Cell phones were hurting our kids academically. We watched academic performance just plummet. They were hurting our kids emotionally as mental health challenges went through the roof. And finally, they were causing substantial disturbance and distraction. And we just watched behavior decline in schools. And so much of it is tied back to cell phones. And so we worked really hard with parents and students and teachers and administrators to create cell phone free education. And we're already seeing the huge benefit. We're watching test scores go up. We're watching mental health challenges go down. We're watching the behavior challenges in school decrease. And I have to say, so many of the students I talk to, once they get past that, can I have my cell phone? And I give them a hug and I say, come on, you're doing so much better in school. They look at me and they say, Governor, you're right. I'm doing so much better in school. I had a young man tell me at a high school football game this past fall, he looked at me and he said, I got on the honor roll this year. I haven't been on the honor roll ever. So I just am constantly reminded that sometimes the basic common sense truth is that being in a classroom with a teacher who opens up avenues for you, listening to your fellow students, staying focused, and not being distracted the way that cell phones inevitably distract folks has been a good thing.
Well, good for you. My daughter also said to say, while it may not be immediately popular with the students, it is immensely popular with teachers and parents. So good for you for being a leader in the country on that. Okay, the last question from 7th grader is, do you wish you could have run for a second term?
I do. Listen, I think that Virginia has a constitutional commitment to a one-term governor. And we knew that when we came in. And we've worked at a pace that I hope has gotten 8 years of work jammed into a 4-year period. Feels like it. And I think the results in the Commonwealth demonstrate it. But I would have loved to run again. I think that we've demonstrated to Virginians that we are delivering outstanding results and that the Commonwealth should continue to soar. We've had record job growth and we've had record revenues that have allowed us to have record tax breaks for Virginians. And we've had this 35% decline in murders across the Commonwealth, and educational excellence has been restored with Virginia leading the nation in reducing chronic absenteeism and leading all of our peer states in restoring math proficiency in the classroom. I mean, we've just moved the needle in a big way across so many things, and I would love to keep doing it. I recognize I can't, and therefore I'm just so grateful for the opportunity that I have had to serve. And I would encourage our 7th graders, but everybody else, to find time in your life to serve, to find time where you can step out or step in, depending on your career moment, and serve local, state, or national politics and not national public service, because it has been the joy of a lifetime and the honor of a lifetime to serve 8.8 million Virginians.
No, excellent. And I think if you could have run for a second term, you would have been reelected easily. But let's wrap this up. Okay, so years from now, looking back, what would you like us, your family, your children, all of us, these 7th graders, to consider to have been your legacy as the 74th governor of Virginia?
Kevin, I so dislike the word legacy. It's such a funny word. because it seems to almost communicate a predetermined desire for an ultimate outcome that you will be remembered for. And I just think about this differently. I am who I am. I believe what I believe. I am both philosophically based on the things that we're doing, but also bring a just relentless pursuit of results. And I believe that I work really, really hard at delivering for Virginians. And I guess if I had to answer your question, I would just hope that folks would recognize that I am guided by my faith. I am dedicated and committed to my family. And I poured everything that I have into this job for the last 4 years. And that Virginia was better off when I left than when we started. And to me, that is not something I think about every day, but those are the inputs that go into my daily activities.
All right, that's awesome. So with that said, how do you consider how you will continue to contribute in your life, looking ahead? The gifts that God has given you, that you've developed, that have been influenced by all these different forces and people, how are you thinking about your next contribution?
Well, first of all, I am not rushing into it. And I think one of the mistakes that a lot of people make in this position is they spend a disproportionate amount of their time serving, and particularly as it is winding up, trying to worry about the next thing. And I just have really worked hard not to be doing that. I get 4 years to serve, and I want to serve. I want to serve all the way up to 11:59 on January the 17th. And then they will escort me off the grounds. But I'm going to serve right up to the end. And then I'm going to take Suzanne on to vacation, and we're going to reflect and just have fun together. And then, more importantly, I'm going to stop and listen. And I'm going to listen to people I trust, but I'm also going to listen to the Lord, and then we'll decide what's next. I have immensely both enjoyed and felt purposeful during this time of service. And that is not lost on me. And I do believe that oftentimes folks rush into the next thing and don't spend time listening and praying. And so that's what I'm going to do next. And then we'll see what comes after that.
All right. Well, we're all looking for that next thing, and the next thing after that, and the next thing after that. All right. Last two questions. Looking back on a younger version of yourself, maybe it was when you were still in high school or in your early college days, what would you tell that younger version of yourself today to have done any differently?
The only thing that I would reemphasize is the basic words of "you can do it." And I think oftentimes doubt or a lack of confidence seeps its way into all of us. And it is that constant reassurance that you can do it. It's that constant reassurance that we do have a loving Creator who unconditionally supports us. And therefore we can count on it. And it is that confidence that if we set aspirational targets, we think big, then we really can achieve it. But it's going to require hard work. It's going to require building teams. It's going to require holding ourselves accountable for delivering. And most importantly, it's going to require a passion to deliver it. But that's what I would tell myself. I would tell myself, be confident, you could do it.
All right. Well, building on that, the last question, the going out question, very much in line with what you just said there. To anyone listening, whether they're in the Commonwealth of Virginia, whether they're seventh graders or in their 70s, or whether they're in another state in the great United States or somewhere else around the world, because we have a listening audience everywhere, what advice would you give to anyone listening about how they might continue to think about living a life of true purpose and meaning?
That's a big question.
Well, this is the Going Big podcast.
I was about to say, it's a big question on the Going Big podcast. And what I would contribute to the extraordinary people that you've had on your podcast and the great words of wisdom that they have shared is pretty simple. First, believe, dream, think through what could be, and don't limit based on what is. And I think that's the first big step. Dream. But second of all, it is put yourself on a path to actually do it. Don't be one of those folks that has an idea a minute and really doesn't ever purposefully pursue it. A life of purpose is a life of doing things that are impactful, of doing things that can change, things that are wrong, things that are bad, things that need to be done. And that's why we're here, to live a life of purpose. And everyone has been put here in order to fulfill their purpose. And so that's part of, I think, the great, great joy of life, which is dreaming about that purpose, thinking about what could be, what might be, and then bringing all of your God-given talents and all of the supports and capabilities that are around you in order to pursue it and deliver results.
Well, Governor Glenn Youngkin, it has been a great honor and privilege to have you on, and particularly in these closing days of your remarkable administration. Thank you for your leadership, and we'll look forward to having you again in a few years to talk about that next stage of your life.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. I can't tell you how much I appreciate being with you, and I wish you and your family and all of your viewers a blessed 2026, and may the Lord continue to bless and keep you.
Yeah, peace be with you. Thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in to the Going Big podcast. I hope today's conversation left you feeling energized and ready to tackle your biggest goals. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps spread the word, and it gets these inspiring stories out to more people. You can also find more content, resources, and updates at our website, goingbigpodcast.com. Remember, the only limits are the ones you don't challenge, the limits that you impose on yourself. Keep pushing, keep growing, and above all, keep going big. See you next time on the Going Big podcast.